Words have power. Books were once burned to keep them out of the hands of the masses. But burning pages doesn't destroy ideas. Ideas and words live on today in libraries as readers discover themselves and their place in the community. Every year, the American Library Association records hundreds of book censorship incidences in libraries across the U.S. Each individual who demands censorship infringes on the First Amendment rights of readers. Each request to remove a book eliminates the voices of storytellers and dismisses the needs of readers who find themselves in those pages. Most threats are unsuccessful, thanks to the teachers, librarians, authors, and even kids who rise up against censorship in libraries, and their words have power. These resilient readers know that banned books benefit our worldview, our empathy, and our democracy.
My name is Wendy, and I'm the host of the University of Arkansas Pulaski Tech's Banned Books Week 2020 Readout. Banned Books Week, BBW, is national recognition that we celebrate every year during the last week of September. It was created as a series of events and activities to bring public awareness to censorship issues. As Americans, we all have the right to express our thoughts and opinions, and in turn, to have access to others' published thoughts and opinions, no matter how unpopular they may be. Unfortunately, many of us take this right to freedom of expression for granted. Every year, there are a variety of attempts made by individuals or groups to remove or restrict access to items held in libraries because of the ideas and opinions expressed or the language used within them. Librarians fight against this sort of censorship in order to maintain everyone's freedom of expression. With the public's understanding and support, we will be able to fight that much harder. So let's bring on the readers of Banned Books 2020.
Hello, and thank you all for joining us for our virtual readout during Banned Books Week. My name is Raquel Roulette, and I'm a student and ambassador at UA-PTC. I just wanted to share a little bit about what exactly a banned book is. A banned book has been targeted for removal or restriction from libraries and schools due to attempts at content censorship. They continue to be banned, but the fight to read them is alive and well. Librarians, teachers, students, and community members are fighting for and standing up for the freedom to read. Celebrate your freedom to read and celebrate Banned Books Week. Today, I chose to read from the Holy Bible, a banned and challenged book. I'm going to read from 1 Corinthians chapter 13. And now, I will show you the best way of all. I may speak in different languages of men or even angels, but if I do not have love, then I am only a noisy bell or a ringing cymbal. I may have the gift of prophecy. I may understand all the secret things of God and all knowledge, and I may have faith so great that I can move mountains. But even with all these things, if I do not have love, then I am nothing. I may give everything I have to feed the poor, and I may even give my body as an offering to be burned, but I gain nothing by doing these things if I do not have love. Love is patient and love is kind. Love is not jealous. Love does not brag, and it is not proud. Love is not rude. It is not selfish, and it does not become angry easily. Love does not remember wrongs done against it. Love is not happy with evil, but is happy with truth. Love patiently accepts all things. It always trusts, always hopes, and always continues strong. Love never ends. There are gifts of prophecy, but they will be ended. There are gifts of speaking in different languages, but those gifts will end. There is gift of knowledge, but it will be ended. These things will end because this knowledge and these prophecies we have are not complete. But when perfection comes, the things that are not complete will end. When I was a child, I talked like a child. I thought like a child. I made plans like a child. When I became a man, I stopped those childish ways. It is the same with us. Now we see as if we are looking into a dark mirror. But at that time, in the future, we shall see clearly. Now I know only a part, but at that time I will know fully, as God has known me. So these three things continue forever: faith, hope, and love. And the greatest of all these is love. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Logan Oliver. Brave New World was rated number 3 on the American Library Association's 2010 list of most challenged books, but history of controversy extends back to its publication. The novel was first banned in Ireland in 1931 for anti-religion, anti-family, and blasphemous content. Australia quickly followed by censoring the book in the same year. In the U.S., there were 8 separate accounts of censorship in states including Maryland, Missouri, Oklahoma, California, Alabama, Texas, Indiana, and Delaware, all of which occurred in U.S. public schools. Brave New World continues to be challenged in public schools for obscenity and vulgarity, and being therefore inappropriate for children. A father of a student has argued that the novel's dystopian setting disallows students from understanding ethical citizenship and morality. Brave New World by Aldous Huxley. Chapter 3. Outside in the garden it was playtime. Naked in the warm June sunshine, 600 or 700 little boys and girls were running with shrill yells over the lawns, or playing ball games, or squatting silently in 2s and 3s among the flowering shrubs. The roses were in bloom. 2 nightingales soliloquized in the boskage. A cuckoo was just going out of tune among the lime trees. The air was drowsy with the murmur of bees and helicopters. The director and his students stood for a short time watching a game of centrifugal bumblepuppy. 20 children were grouped in a circle around a chrome steel tower. A ball, thrown up so as to land on the platform at the top of the tower, rolled down into the interior, fell on a rapidly revolving disc, was hurled through one or other of the numerous apertures pierced in the cylindrical casing, and had to be caught. Strange, mused the director as they turned away. Strange to think that even in our Ford's day, most games were played without more apparatus than a ball or two and a few sticks and perhaps a bit of netting. Imagine the folly of allowing people to play elaborate games which do nothing whatever to increase consumption. It's madness. Nowadays, the controllers won't approve of any new game unless it can be shown that it requires at least as much apparatus as the most complicated of existing games, he interrupted himself. That's a charming little group, he said, pointing. In a little grassy bay, between the tall clumps of Mediterranean heather, 2 children, a little boy of about 7 and a little girl who might have been a year older, were playing very gravely and with all the focused attention of scientists intent on a labor of discovery, a rudimentary sexual game. Charming, charming, the DHC repeated sentimentally. Charming, the boys politely agreed, but their smile was rather patronizing. They had put aside similar childish amusements too recently, to be able to watch them now without a touch of contempt. Charming? But it was just a pair of kids fooling about. That was all, just kids. I always think the director was continuing in the same rather maudlin tone when he was interrupted by a loud boo-hooing. From a neighboring shrubbery emerged a nurse, leading by the hands a small boy who howled as he went. An anxious-looking little girl trotted at her heels. "What's the matter?" asked the director. The nurse shrugged her shoulders. "Nothing much," she answered. "It's just that this little boy seems rather reluctant to join the ordinary erotic play. I'd noticed it once or twice before, and now again today. He started yelling just now." "Honestly," put in the anxious-looking little girl, I didn't mean to hurt him or anything, honestly." "Of course you didn't, dear," said the nurse reassuringly. And so she went on, turning back to the director. "I'm taking him in to see the assistant superintendent of psychology, just to see if anything's at all abnormal." "Quite right," said the director. "Take him in. You stay here, little girl," he added, as the nurse moved away with her still howling charge. "What's your name?" "Polly Trotsky." "And a very good name, too," said the director. "Run away now and see if you can find some other little boy to play with." The child scampered off into the bushes and was lost to sight. Thank you kindly.
I remember many years ago hearing about a controversial series of children's books about magic, so I had to find out for myself. When I read the Harry Potter books, I discovered an amazing world that featured young people who were pooling their skills and talents to work against dark forces. If you haven't ever read them, you're definitely missing out. But they're children's books. No, you're never too old to read about powerful friendships. So maybe you've seen the movies. Many more adventures await in the books. Maybe you're missing your favorite sports team right now. Well, the Harry Potter series even has its own World Cup, its own sport called Quidditch. Clutching their purchases, Mr. Weasley in the lead, they all hurried into the wood, following the lantern-lit trail. They could hear the sounds of thousands of people moving around them, shouts and laughter, snatches of singing. The atmosphere of feverish excitement was highly infectious. Harry couldn't stop grinning. They walked through the wood for 20 minutes, talking and joking loudly, until at last they emerged on the other side and found themselves in the shadow of a gigantic stadium. Though Harry could see only a fraction of the immense gold walls surrounding the fields, he could tell that 10 cathedrals would fit comfortably inside it. If you haven't read the Harry Potter books, get on it.
Hi, I'm Sarah, and I'm going to read from The Lord of the Rings by J.R.R. Tolkien. But, said Sam, and tears started in his eyes, I thought you were going to enjoy the Shire too, for years and years after all you have done. So I thought too once, but I have been too deeply hurt, Sam. I tried to save the Shire, and it has been saved, but not for me. It must often be so, Sam, when things are in danger. Someone has to give them up, lose them so that others may keep them. But you are my heir. All that I had and might have had, I leave to you. And also you have Rose and Eleanor, and Frodo lad will come, and Rosie lass, and Mary, and Goldilocks, and Pippin, and perhaps more that I cannot see. Your hands and your wits will be needed everywhere. You will be the mayor, of course, as long as you want to be, and the most famous gardener in history. And you will read things out of the Red Book and keep alive the memory of the age that is gone, so that people will remember the great danger and so love their beloved land all the more. And that will keep you as busy and as happy as anyone can be, as long as your part of the story goes on. Come now and ride with me. Then Frodo kissed Merry and Pippin, and last of all Sam, and went aboard, and the sails were drawn up, and the wind blew, and slowly the ship sailed away down the long grey firth, and the light of the glass of Galadriel that Frodo bore glimmered and was lost. And the ship went out into the high sea and passed on into the west, until at last, on a night of rain, Frodo smelled a sweet fragrance on the air and heard the sound of singing that came over the water. And then it seemed to him that as in his dream in the house of Bombadil, the grey rain curtain turned all to silver glass and was rolled back, and he beheld white shores, and beyond them a far green country under a swift sunrise. But to Sam the evening deepened to darkness as he stood at the haven, and as he looked at the grey sea he saw only a shadow on the waters that was soon lost in the west. There still he stood, far into the night, hearing only the sigh and murmur of the waves on the shores of Middle-earth, and the sound of them sank deep into his heart. Beside him stood Merry and Pippin, and they were silent.
Hello everyone, welcome to 2020 Banned Books Week. Mr. Hancock here. I teach English here at UA-PTC, and today I'm going to be reading from the Banned Books collection of scary stories. And this book, or these three books, were banned in many ways, mainly due to the dark, morbid, occultish nature of the content, but also because of the artwork, as you can see. The artwork that is written inside of, or drawn, illustrated inside this book is something different for, and odd for children, but I definitely remember getting this from a book fair as a kid and absolutely loved it. So today's reading, I'm going to be reading the short little story, Wonderful Sausage. One dark, rainy Saturday afternoon, a fat, jolly butcher named Samuel Blunt had an argument over money with his wife, Eloise. Blunt lost his temper and killed Eloise. Then he ground her up into sausage meat and buried her bones under a big flat rock in the backyard. To keep the murder a secret, he told everyone that she moved away. Blunt mixed his new sausage meat with pork, then seasoned it with salt and pepper, added some sage and thyme, and a bit of garlic. To give it a special flavor, he smoked it in the smokehouse for a while. He called it Blunt's Special Sausage. There was such a demand for his new sausage that Blunt bought the best hogs he could find and started raising his own pork. He also kept a sharp lookout for humans who might make tasty sausage meat. One day, a nice, plump school teacher came into his shop. Blunt grabbed her and ground her up. Another time, Blunt's dentist came by. He was a little round man, and into the grinder he went. Then, one by one, the children in the neighborhood began to disappear, and so did their kittens and puppies. But no one ever dreamed that Blunt, the butcher, had anything to do with it. Things went on that way for years. Then one day, Blunt made a big mistake. A fat boy came into the butcher shop. Blunt grabbed him and started to drag him off to the sausage grinder. but the boy broke loose and ran out of the shop. Blunt chased after him, waving a big butcher knife. When people saw this, they realized at once what had become of all the missing children and grown-ups and kittens and puppies. An angry crowd gathered at the butcher shop. No one knows for sure just what happened to Blunt that day. Some say he was fed to his hogs. Others say he was fed to his sausage grinder. But he was never seen again, and neither was his wonderful sausage meat.
The truth is the light, and the light is the truth.
People always think something's all true.
Best way to clear the air is to have it all out in the open.
Indifference and neglect often do much more damage than outright dislike. Human beings can be awful cruel to one another.
Maybe everybody in the whole damn world's scared of each other.
What is a country? A country is a piece of land surrounded on all sides by boundaries, usually unnatural.
Life here is so orderly, so predictable, so painless. It's what they've chosen.
Perhaps it is better to wake up after all, even to suffer, rather than to remain a dupe to illusions all one's life.
How nice to feel nothing and still get credit for being fully alive.
Yes, and civilization is sterilization.
Life is a constant struggle between being an individual and being a member of the community. I suddenly understood that if every moment of a book should be taken seriously, then every moment of life should be taken seriously as well.
I believe that today, more than ever, a book should be sought after, even if it has only one great page in it. Anything that has ore in it. Anything that is capable of resuscitating the body and the soul.
Listen to the mustn'ts, child. Listen to the don'ts. Listen to the shouldn'ts, the impossibles, the won'ts. Listen to the never haves. Then listen close to me. Anything can happen, child. Anything can be.
The world is a possibility, if only you'll discover it.
Happiness can be found, even in the darkest of times, if one only remembers to turn on the light.
My name is Wendy, and I'm going to be reading from Malcolm X. Malcolm X is an autobiography written by a great author named Alex Haley. Alex Haley wrote the book Roots also. So Malcolm X was an American man who really lived and had quite a life. He died in 1965, about a month before I was born. Oops. So I'm going to read a little bit about him. And this book was actually published a year before he died, in 1964. So he was born in 1925. And I'm going to read a part where he's quite young in the beginning. His father was black, and his mother was white and black. Sorry. Okay, here we go. One afternoon in 1931, when Wilford, Hilda, Filbert, and I came home, my mother and father were having one of their arguments. Excuse me. There had lately been a lot of tension around the house because of Black Legion threats. Anyway, my father had taken one of the rabbits which we were raising and ordered my mother to cook it. We raised rabbits, but sold them to whites. My father had taken a rabbit from the rabbit pen. He'd pulled off the rabbit's head. He was so strong. He needed no knife to behead chickens or rabbits. With one twist of his big black hands, he simply twisted off the head and threw the bleeding neck thing back at my mother's feet. My mother was crying. She started to skin the rabbit, preparing to cook it. But my father was so angry, he slammed out of the front door and started walking up the road toward town. It was then that my mother had this vision. She had always been a strange woman in this sense, and had always had a strong intuition of things about to happen. And most of her children are the same way, I think. When something is about to happen, I can feel something, sense something. I never have known something to happen that has caught me completely off guard except once. And that was when years later I discovered facts I couldn't believe about a man who, up until that discovery, would gladly have given my life for. My father was well up the road when my mother ran screaming out onto the porch. "Early, early!" She screamed his name. She clutched up her apron in one hand and ran down across the yard into the road. My father turned around. He saw her. For some reason, considering how angry he had been when he left, he waved at her. But he kept on going. She told me later, my mother did, that she had a vision of my father's end. All the rest of the afternoon, she was not herself, crying, nervous, and upset. She finished cooking the rabbit and put the whole thing in the warmer part of the back stove. When my father was not back home by our bedtime, my mother hugged and clutched us. We felt strange, not knowing what to do because she had never acted like that. I remember waking up to the sound of my mother screaming again. When I scrambled out, I saw the police in the living room. They were trying to calm her down. She had snatched on her clothes to go with them. All of a sudden, us children who were staring knew, without anyone having to say it, that something terrible had happened to our father. My mother was taken by the police to the hospital and to a room where a sheet was over my father in a bed. And she wouldn't look. She was afraid to look. Probably it was wise that she didn't. My father's skull on one side was crushed in. I was told later, Negroes in Lansing have always whispered that he was attacked and then laid across some tracks for a streetcar to run over him. His body was cut almost in half. He lived 2.5 hours in that condition. Negroes then were stronger than they are now, especially Georgia Negroes. Negroes born in Georgia had to be strong simply to survive. It was morning when we children had at home got the word that he was dead, and I was 6. I can remember a vague commotion, the house filled up with people crying, saying bitterly that the white-black legion had finally gotten him. My mother was hysterical in the bedroom. Women were holding smelling salts under her nose, and she was still hysterical at the funeral. I need to stop there. I want to keep reading more. This is a fantastic book of facts that really occurred that we can still read. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Sam Staggs, and I'll be reading from George Orwell's 1984. The frightening thing he reflected for the 10,000th time as he forced his shoulders painfully backwards. With hands on hips, they were gyrating their bodies from the waist, an exercise that was supposed to be good for the back muscles. The frightening thing was that it all might be true. If the party could thrust its hand into the past and say of this or that event it never happened, that surely was more terrifying than mere torture and death. The party said that Oceania had never been in alliance with Eurasia. He, Winston Smith, knew that Oceania had been in alliance with Eurasia as short a time as 4 years ago. But where did that knowledge exist? Only in his own consciousness, which in any case must soon be annihilated. And if all others accepted the lie which the party imposed, if all records told the same tale, then the lie passed into history and became truth. Who controls the past? Ran the party slogan. Controls the future. Who controls the present? Controls the past. And yet the past, though of its nature alterable, never had been altered. Whatever was true now was true from everlasting to everlasting. It was quite simple. All that was needed was an unending series of victories over your own memory. Reality control, they called it. In newspeak, doublethink. To know and not to know, to be conscious of complete truthfulness while telling carefully constructed lies, to hold simultaneously two opinions which canceled out, knowing them to be contradictory and believing in both of them, to use logic against logic, to repudiate morality while laying claim to it, to believe that democracy was impossible and that the party was the guardian of democracy, to forget whatever it was necessary to forget, then to draw it back into memory again at the moment when it was needed, and and then promptly to forget it again, and above all, to apply the same process to the process itself. That was the ultimate subtlety, consciously to induce unconsciousness, and then once again to become unconscious of the fact of hypnosis you had just performed. Even to understand the word doublethink involved the use of doublethink. Sometimes, indeed, you could put your finger on a definite lie. It was not true, for example, as was claimed by the party history books, that the party had invented airplanes. He remembered airplanes since his earliest childhood, but you could prove nothing, because there was never any evidence.
Hi, my name is Michaela Thompson, and today I'll be reading from the book The House on Mango Street by San Justice Neros. The House on Mango Street. We didn't always live on Mango Street. Before that, we lived on Loomis on the 3rd floor, and before that, we lived on Keeler. Before Keeler, it was Paulina, and before that, I can't remember. But what I remember most is moving a lot. Each time it seemed there'd be one more of us. By the time we got to Mango Street, we were 6. Mama, Papa, Carlos, Kiki, my sister Nini, and me. The house on Mango Street is ours, and we don't have to pay rent to anybody, or share the yard with the people downstairs, or be careful not to make too much noise, and there isn't a landlord banging on the ceiling with a broom. But even so, it's not the house we thought we'd get. We had to leave the flat on Loomis quick. The water pipes broke, and the landlord wouldn't fix them because the house was too old. We had to leave fast. We were using the washroom next door and carrying water over in empty milk gallons. That's why Mama and Papa looked for a house, and that's why we moved into the house on Mango Street, far away on the other side of town. They always told us that one day we would move into a house, a real house, that would be ours for always, so we wouldn't have to move each year. And our house would have running water and pipes that worked. And inside it would have real stairs, not hallway stairs, but stairs inside like the houses on TV. And we would have a basement and at least 3 washrooms, so when we took a bath, we wouldn't have to tell everybody. So our house would be white with trees around it, and a great big yard, and grass growing without a fence. This was the house Papa talked about when he held a lottery ticket, and this was the house that Mama dreamt up in the story she told us before we went to bed. But the house on Mango Street is not the way they told it at all. It's small and red with tight steps in front and windows so small you think they were holding their breath. The bricks were crumbling in place and the front door was so swollen you had to push hard to get in. There is no front yard, only 4 little elms the city planted by the curb. Out back is a small garage for the car we don't own yet, and a small yard that looks smaller between the 2 buildings on either side. There is stairs in our house, but they're ordinary hallway stairs, and the house only has 1 washroom. Everyone has to share a bedroom. Mama and Papa, Carlos and Kiki, and me and Nini. Once when we were living on Loomis, a nun from my school passed by and saw me playing out front. The laundromat downstairs had been boarded up because it had been robbed 2 days before, and the owner had painted on the wood, "Yes, we're open," so as not to lose business. "Where do you live?" she asked. "There," I pointing up to the 3rd floor. "You live there?" "There." I had to look to where she pointed, the 3rd floor. The paint peeling wooden bars Papa had nailed on the window so we wouldn't fall out. "You live there?" The way she said it made me feel like nothing. "There? I live there." I nodded. I knew then I had to have a house, a real house, one that I could point to, but this isn't it. The house on Mango Street isn't it. "For the time being," Mama says. "Temporarily," said Papa, "but I know how those things go." Thank you for listening.
Okay, so I'll be reading The Handmaid's Tales by Margaret Atwood. Chapter 1, Night. We slept in what had once been the gymnasium. The floor was of varnished wood with stripes and circles painted on it. For the games that were formerly played there, the hoops for the basketball nets were still in place. Though the nets were gone, a balcony ran around the room for the spectators, and I thought I could smell, faintly like an after-image, the pungent scent of sweat, shot through with the sweet taint of chewing gum and perfume from the watching girls, felt skirted as I knew from my pictures. Later in mini skirts, the pants, and then one an earring. Spiky green streaked hair, dances would have been held here. The music lingered, a Palimpsest of unheard sound, style upon style, undercut of drums, a forlorn wail, garlands made of tissue paper flowers, cardboard devils, a revolving ball of mirrors, powdering the dancers with a snow of light. There was old sex in the room, and loneliness, and the expectation of something without a shape or a name. I remember that yearning for something that was always about to happen and was never the same, as the hands that were on us there and then in the small of the back, or out back in the parking lot, or in the television room with the sound turned down and only the pictures flickering over lifting flesh. We yearned for the future. How did we learn it? The talent for instability? It was in the air, and it was still in the air, an afterthought, as we tried to sleep in the army cots that had been set up in rows with spaces between us so that we could not talk. We have flannelette sheets like children's and army issue blankets, old ones that still said U.S. We folded our clothes neatly and laid them on the stools at the end of the bed. The lights were turned down but not out. Aunt Sarah and Aunt Elizabeth patrolled. They had electric cattle prods slung on thongs from their leather belts. No guns, though. Even they could not be trusted with guns. Guns were for the guards, specifically picked from the angels. The guards weren't allowed inside the building except when called, and we weren't allowed out except for our walks, twice daily, 2 by 2, around the football field, which was enclosed now by a chain-link fence topped with barbed wire. The angels stood outside with their backs to us. They were objects of fear to us, but of something else as well. Only they would look. Only we could talk to them. Something could be exchanged, we thought. Some deal made, some trade-off. We still had our bodies. That was our fantasy. We learned our whisper almost without sound. In the semi-darkness, we could stretch out our arms, when the ants weren't looking, and touch each other's hands across space. We learned to lip-read our heads flat on the bed, turned sideways, watching each other's mouths. In this way, we exchanged names from bed to bed. Alma, Janine, Dolores, Moira, June.
Hello, I'll be reading from my favorite book, banned book by Maya Angelou, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. A free bird leaps on the back of the wind and floats downstream till the current ends and dips his wing in the orange sun rays and dares to claim the sky. But a bird that stalks down his narrow cage can seldom see through his bars of rage. His wings are clipped and his feet are tied, so he opens his throat to sing. The caged bird sings with the fearful trill of things unknown but longed for still. And his tune is heard on the distant hill, for the caged bird sings of freedom.
Okay, hi there. I'm Kate Ernie, and today I'm going to be reading from Justin Richardson's And Tango Makes Three. In the middle of New York City, there is a great big park called Central Park. Children love to play there. It has a toy boat pond where they can sail their boats. It has a carousel to ride on in the summer and an ice rink to skate on in the winter. Best of all, it has its very own zoo. Every day, families of all kinds go to visit the animals there. But children and their parents aren't the only families at the zoo. The animals make families of their own. There are red panda bear families with mothers and fathers and furry red panda bear cubs. There are monkey dads and monkey moms raising noisy monkey babies. There are toad families and toucan families and cotton-top tamarin families too. And in the penguin house, there are penguin families. Every year at the same time, the girl penguins start noticing the boy penguins, and the boy penguins start noticing the girls. When the right girl and the right boy find each other, they become a couple. Two penguins in the penguin house were a little bit different. One was named Roy, and the other was named Silo. Roy and Silo were both boys, but they did everything together. They bowed to each other and walked together. They sang to each other and swam together. Wherever Roy went, Silo went too. They didn't spend much time with the girl penguins, and the girl penguins didn't spend much time with them. Instead, Roy and Silo wound their necks around each other. Their keeper, Mr. Gramsci, noticed the two penguins and thought to himself, they must be in love. Roy and Silo watched how the other penguins made a home. So they built a nest of stones for themselves. Every night, Roy and Silo slept there together just like the other penguin couples. And every morning, Roy and Silo woke up together, but one day Roy and Silo saw that the other couples could do something that they could not. The mama penguin would lay an egg. She and the papa penguin would take turns keeping the egg warm until finally it would hatch, and then there would be a baby penguin. Roy and Silo had no egg to sit on or keep warm. They had no baby chick to feed or cuddle or love. Their nest was nice, but it was a little empty. One day, Roy found something that looked like what the other penguins were hatching, and he brought it to their nest. It was only a rock, but Silo carefully sat on it and sat and sat. When Silo got sleepy, he slept. When Silo was done sleeping and sitting, he swam and Roy sat. Day after day, Silo and Roy sat on the rock, but nothing happened. Then Mr. Gramsci got an idea. He found an egg that needed to be cared for, so he brought it to Roy and Silo's nest. Roy and Silo knew just what to do. They moved the egg to the center of their nest. Every day they turned it so each side stayed warm. Some days Roy sat while Silo went and looked for food. Other days it was Silo's turn to take care of their egg. They sat in the morning and they sat at night. They sat through lunchtime and swim time and supper. They sat at the beginning of the month, they sat at the end of the month, and they sat on all days in between. Until one day, they heard a sound coming from inside their egg. Peep, peep, it said. Roy and Silo called back, squawk, squawk. Peep, peep, answered the egg. Suddenly a tiny hole appeared in the egg, and then, crack, out came their very own baby. She had fuzzy white feathers and a funny black beak. Now Roy and Silo were fathers. We'll call her Tango, Mr. Gramsci said, because it takes two to make a tango. Roy and Silo taught Tango how to sing for them when she was hungry. They fed her food from their beaks. They snuggled her in their nest at night. Tango was the very first penguin in the zoo to have two daddies. Soon, Tango grew strong enough to leave the nest. Roy and Silo took her for a swim, just like all the other penguin families. And all the children who came to the zoo could see Tango and her two fathers playing in the penguin house with the other penguins. Hooray, Roy, hooray, Silo, they called. Welcome, Tango. At night, the three penguins returned to their nest. There they snuggled together, and like all the other penguins in the penguin house, and all the other animals in the zoo, and all the families in the big city around them, they went to sleep. Thank you.
Ships at a distance have every man's wish on board. For some, they come in with the tide. For others, they sail forever on the horizon, never out of sight, never landing, until the watcher turns his eyes away in resignation, his dreams mocked to death by time. That is the life of men. Now, women forget all those things they don't want to remember, and remember everything they don't want to forget. The dream is the truth. Then they act and do things accordingly. So the beginning of this was a woman, and she had come back from burying the dead. Not the dead of sick and ailing, with friends at the pillow and the feet. She had come back from the sodden and the bloated, the sudden dead, their eyes flung wide open in judgment. The people all saw her come, because it was sundown. The sun was gone, but he had left his footprints in the sky. It was the time for sitting on porches beside the road. It was the time to hear things and talk. These sitters had been tongueless, earless, eyeless conveniences all day long. Mules and other brutes had occupied their skins. But now the sun and the bossman were gone, so the skins felt powerful and human. They became lords of sounds and lesser things. They passed nations through their mouths. They sat in judgment. Seeing the woman as she was made them remember the envy they had stored up from other times, so they chewed up the back parts of their minds and swallowed with relish. They made burning statements with questions and killing tools out of laughs. It was mass cruelty, a mood come alive, words walking without masters, walking all together like harmony in a song. What's she doing coming back here in them overalls? Can't she find no dress to put on? Where's that blue satin dress she left here in? Where all that money her husband took and died and left her? What that old 40-year-old woman doing with her hair swinging down her back like some young gal? Where she left that young lad of a boy she went off here with, thought she was gonna marry? Where he left her? Well, what he done with all her money? I bet she off with some gal so young she ain't even got no hairs. Why she don't stay in her class? When she got to where they were, she turned her face on the banderlog and spoke. They scrambled a noisy, "Good evening," and left their mouths setting open and their ears full of hope. Her speech was pleasant enough, but she kept walking straight onto her gate. The porch couldn't talk for looking. The men noticed her firm buttocks, like she had grapefruits in her hip pockets, the great rope of black hair swinging to her waist and unraveling in the wind like a plume. Then her pugnacious breasts trying to bore holes in her shirt. They, the men, were saving with the mind what they lost with the eye. The women took the faded shirt and muddy overalls and laid them away for remembrance. It was a weapon against her strength, and if it turned out of no significance, still it was a hope that she might fall to their level someday. But nobody moved, nobody spoke, nobody even thought to swallow spit until her gate slammed behind her. Pearl Stone opened her mouth and laughed real hard because she didn't know what else to do. She fell all over Mrs. Sumpkins while she laughed, and Mrs. Sumpkins snorted violently and sucked her teeth. Y'all let her worry. You ain't like me. I ain't got her to study about. If she ain't got manners enough to stop and let folks know how she been making out, let her go on. She ain't even worth talking after, Lulu Moss drawled through her nose. She sits high, but she looks low. That's what I say about these old women running after young boys.
Morris Micklewhite and the Tangerine Dress. Morris Micklewhite has a mother named Moira and a cat named Moo. Morris likes Sundays because his mother makes him pancakes on Sundays. Mondays are great too because on Mondays Morris goes to school. Morris likes lots of things about school. He likes to paint, he likes to do puzzles, he likes the apple juice at snack time and singing the loudest during circle time. Most of all, Morris likes the dress-up center and the Tangerine Dress. Morris likes the color of the dress. It reminds him of tigers, the sun, and his mother's hair. He likes the noises the dress makes, swish, swish, swish when he walks, and crinkle, crinkle, crinkle when he sits down. He takes turns wearing all the different shoes, but his most favorite ones go click, click, click across the floor. Sometimes the boys make fun of Morris. Sometimes the girls do too. Morris pretends he can't hear their words over the swish, swish, swishes, crinkle, crinkle, crinkles, and click, click, clicks he makes when he walks. Morris pretends he can't hear their words, but he can. On Monday, Becky tried to pull the dress right off his back. "You can't wear it. You're a boy." On Tuesday, Eli, Henry, and the other boys wouldn't let Morris ride on their spaceship unless he took the dress off. Astronauts don't wear dresses. On Wednesday, Bay and Lila noticed Morris's fingernails. His mother had painted them for him the night before. They chased him around the playground shouting, "Pinky fingers, pinky fingers." On Thursday, the boys wouldn't sit near Morris at the snack table. "We don't want you to turn us into girls." On Friday, Morris pretended he had a tummy ache. When he thought of all the kids in his class and all the mean things they did and said, his tummy ached for real. His mother let him stay in bed and read books about elephants. Moo sat on his lap. Moo liked elephants too. On Saturday, Morris's mother bought him some apple juice. As he took a sip, she stroked his hair. Moo purred loudly. Morris suddenly felt well enough to do a puzzle. He hummed to himself. He felt better still. On Sunday, Morris crawled out from under the covers after a wonderful dream about being on a space safari with Moo. In the dream, they saw big blue elephants and tigers the color of the sun that Morris could hold in the palm of his hand. The elephants swished, swished, swished as they moved through the grass, and the tigers ate giant leaves that crinkled, crinkled, crinkled as their tiny teeth chewed them. The buttons on the spaceship click, click, clicked under Morris's fingers. Morris wanted to share all the amazing things he had seen. He took out his brushes, put on his smock, and began to paint, using every color he could imagine. He showed his painting to his mother when he was done. He pointed out the big blue elephant, the tiny tigers the color of the sun, the tall grass, and the giant leaves. He pointed out Moo in his shiny round space helmet. "And who's that?" his mother asked, pointing at the little boy in the tangerine dress riding atop the big blue elephant. Morris was hoping she'd ask. "That's me," he said. On Monday, Morris went to school with his painting rolled up in his backpack. When he had the chance, he put on the dress that reminded him of the tigers and the sun and of his mother's hair. Morris swished, 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 the tangerine dress crinkled, 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 his shoes click, click, clicked. Morris felt wonderful. Eli and Henry wouldn't let him on their spaceship, so Morris built his own. He hung his painting.
Don't let this happen to you.
Here, hold this.
Or this.
American colonies?
Ways to keep your banned books. Number 1, lick cover.
You should not be reading that.
Number 2, play human echo.
You shouldn't be reading that.
You shouldn't be reading that.
What do you mean?
What do you mean?
This book is perfectly fine.
This book is perfectly fine.
Well, okay then.
Okay then.
Number 3, learn karate.
Hey, you shouldn't be reading that.
Yeah! Oh, yeah.
Okay, keep your book.
Yeah, bad. Can't let her pants.
Number 4, silent but deadly.
Oh, hey,
Oh. And number 5, just say no.
Speak by Lori Halse Anderson. You should not be reading that.
Why not? I have every right to read what I want to. We live in a country where freedom of speech is celebrated. Censorship denies our freedom as individuals to choose and think for ourselves.
Arrgh! Pirate Pete says, free people, read freely. Arrgh!
Random House Audiobooks presents Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison. Read for you by Joe Morton.
Invisible Man. I am an invisible man. No, I am not a spook like those who haunted Edgar Allan Poe, nor am I one of your Hollywood movie ectoplasms. I am a man of substance, of flesh and bone, fiber and liquids, and I might even be said to possess a mind. I am invisible, understand, simply because people refuse to see me. Like the bodiless heads you see sometimes in circus sideshows, it is as though I have been surrounded by mirrors of hard, distorting glass. When they approach me, they see only my surroundings, themselves, or figments of their imagination, indeed, everything and anything except me. Nor is my invisibility exactly a matter of a biochemical accident to my epidermis. That invisibility to which I refer occurs because of a peculiar disposition of the eyes of those with whom I come in contact, a matter of the construction of their inner eyes, those eyes with which they look through their physical eyes upon reality. I am not complaining, nor am I protesting either. It is sometimes advantageous to be unseen, although it is most often rather wearing on the nerves. Then, too, you're constantly being bumped against by those of poor vision, or, again, you often doubt if you really exist. You wonder whether you aren't simply a phantom in other people's minds, say a figure in a nightmare, which the sleeper tries with all his strength to destroy. It's when you feel like this that, out of resentment, you begin to bump people back. And let me confess, you feel that way most of the time. You ache with the need to convince yourself that you do exist in the real world, that you're part of all the sound and anguish, and you strike out with your fists, you curse and you swear to make them recognize you. And, alas, it's seldom successful. One night I accidentally bumped into a man, and perhaps because of the near darkness, he saw me and called me an insulting name. I sprang at him, seized his coat lapels, and demanded that he apologize. He was a tall, blond man, and as my face came close to his, he looked insolently out of his blue eyes and cursed me, his breath hot in my face as he struggled. I pulled his chin down sharp upon the crown of my head, butting him as I had seen the West Indians do, and I felt his flesh tear and the blood gush out, and I yelled, "Apologize! Apologize!" But he continued to curse and struggle, and I butted him again and again until he went down heavily on his knees, profusely bleeding.
The soldier in white is constructed entirely of plaster and gauze. He could not be any sicker without being dead. One large stoppered jar, hanging on a post by his bed, drips fluid into his arm constantly, through a slit in his bandages, while another on the floor drains the fluid away through the zinc pipe rising from his groin. When the jar feeding the inside of the soldier in white's elbow is just about empty, the jar on the floor is just about full, and nurses quickly reverse them. This makes the other patients wonder why the two jars aren't just hooked up to each other, to eliminate the middleman. Outside the hospital, the war is still going on. Men are going mad and being rewarded with medals. Whenever he doesn't have any missions to fly, Hungry Joe gets shrieking nightmares. Late one night, Hungry Joe has a nightmare that Hupel's cat is sleeping on his face, suffocating him. When he wakes up, Hupel's cat is sleeping on his face. His agony is terrifying. The piercing, unearthly howl with which he splits the moonlit dark vibrates in its own impact for seconds. Hungry Joe defeats Hupel's cat in the ensuing fistfight. Fearless and majestic, Everyone in the squadron lives in profound awe and reverence of Major de Coverley. His duties consist entirely of pitching horseshoes, kidnapping Italian laborers, and renting apartments for the enlisted men and officers to use on rest leave. Despite the multitude of perils to which Major de Coverley exposes himself each time he rents apartments, his only injury occurred as he was leading a triumphal procession through Rome, when a cackling, intoxicated old Italian man wounded him in the eye with a flower thrown at close range. Major de Coverley did not flinch once throughout the whole ordeal. In his plane, Captain Yossarian longs to sit in a huddled ball right on top of the escape hatch, inside a sheltering igloo of extra flak suits, his parachute already hooked to his harness where it belongs. Captain Yossarian lost his nerve on the mission to Avignon, and Yossarian lost his nerve because Snowden lost his guts. The only thing that Captain Yossarian wants is to live forever or die trying.
Hi, I'm Steve Armstrong. Today I'm going to read a children's book called The Very Hungry Caterpillar. It's by Eric Carle. In the light of the moon, a little egg lay on a leaf. One Sunday morning, the warm sun came up, and pop, out of the egg came a tiny and very hungry caterpillar. He started to look for some food. On Monday, he ate through one apple, but he was still hungry. On Tuesday, he ate through 2 pears, but he was still hungry. On Wednesday, he ate through 3 plums, but he was still hungry. On Thursday, he ate through 4 strawberries, but he was still hungry. On Friday, he ate through 5 oranges, but he was still hungry. On Saturday, he ate through 1 piece of chocolate cake, 1 ice cream cone, 1 pickle, 1 slice of Swiss cheese, 1 slice of salami, 1 lollipop, 1 piece of cherry pie, 1 sausage, 1 cupcake, and 1 slice of watermelon. That night he had a stomach ache. The next day was Sunday again. The caterpillar ate through 1 nice green leaf, and after that he felt much better. Now he wasn't hungry anymore, and he wasn't a little caterpillar anymore. He was a big fat caterpillar. He built a small house called a cocoon around himself. He stayed inside for more than 2 weeks, and then he nibbled a hole in the cocoon, pushed his way out, and he was a beautiful butterfly. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Veronica Stewart. I'm one of the librarians here at UA-PTC, and I'm going to read from Sinclair Lewis's It Can't Happen Here. Everyone, including Doremus Jessup, had said in 1935, "If ever there is a fascist dictatorship here, American humor and pioneer independence are so marked that it will be absolutely different from anything in Europe." For almost a year after Winthrop came in, this seemed true. The chief was photographed playing poker in shirt sleeves with a derby on the back of his head, with a newspaperman, a chauffeur, and a pair of rugged steelworkers. Dr. McGoblin in person led an Elks brass band and dived in competition with the Atlantic City bathing beauties. It was reputably reported that the Minutemen apologized to political prisoners for having to arrest them, and that the prisoners joked amicably with the guards. At first. All that was gone within a year of the inauguration, and surprised scientists discovered that the whips and handcuffs hurt just as sorely in the clear American air as in the miasmic fogs of Prussia. Doremus, reading the authors he had concealed on the horsehair sofa, the gallant communist Karl Billinger, the gallant anti-communist Cheverian, and the gallant neutral Laurent, began to see something like a biology of dictatorships, all dictatorships. The universal apprehension, the timorous denials of faith, the same methods of arrest, sudden pounding on the door late at night, the squad of police pushing in, the blows, the search, the obscene oaths at the frightened women, the third degree by young snipe of officials, the accompanying blows, and the formal beatings, when the prisoner is forced to count the strokes until he faints, the leprous beds and the sour stew, guards jokingly shooting round and round a prisoner who believes he is being executed, the waiting in solitude to know what will happen, till men go mad and hang themselves. Thus had things gone in Germany, exactly thus in Soviet Russia, in Italy and Hungary and Poland, Spain and Cuba, and Japan and China. Not very different it had been under the blessings of liberty and fraternity in the French Revolution. All dictators had followed the same routine of torture, as if they had all read the same manual of sadistic etiquette. And now, in the humorous, friendly, happy-go-lucky land of Mark Twain, Doremus saw the homicidal maniacs having just as good a time as they had had in Central Europe. So that was an excerpt from Sinclair Lewis's It Can't Happen Here, a frequently challenged and banned book. Thank you.
Hello, my name's Miss Chisholm, Becca Chisholm. I am a reading instructor here at UA-PTC Tech, and a book that I chose is The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn by Mark Twain. I enjoyed this book as a child. It is now a banned book. I enjoy the relationship between the characters and the things that they accomplish and the relationship that they built together. So I'm going to read a small section from it. We went tiptoeing along a path amongst the trees back toward the end of the widow's garden, stooping down so the branches wouldn't scrape our heads. When we was passing by the kitchen, I fell over a root and made a noise. We scrunched down and laid still. Miss Watson's big nigger named Jim was sitting in the kitchen door. He could see him pretty clear, but there was a light behind him. He got up and stretched his neck out a minute listening. Then he said, "Huda." He listened some more. Then he came tiptoeing down and stood right between us. We could have touched him nearly. Well, likely it was minutes and minutes that there wasn't a sound. And we all there was so close together. There was a place on my ankle that got an itching, but I dashed to scratch it. And then my ear began to itch. And next my back, right between my shoulders. Seemed like I'd die if I couldn't scratch. Well, I've noticed that thing plenty times since. If you are with quality or at a funeral or trying to go to sleep when you ain't sleepy, if you are anywheres where you won't do for you to scratch, why, you will itch all over and upward in thousands of places. Pretty soon, Jim says, "Say, who is you? Where is you? Dog, my cats, I didn't hear smurfing." Well, I know what I's going to do. I's going to get down here and listen till I hears it again. So he sat down on the ground betwixt me and Tom. He leaned his back against the tree and stretched his legs out till one of them was almost one of mine. My nose began to itch. It itched till the tears come into my eyes, but I wasn't dashing scratch. Then it began to itch on the inside. Next, I got an itching underneath. I didn't know how I was going to sit still. This miserableness went on as much as 6 or 7 minutes, but it seemed a sight longer than that. I was itching in 11 different places now. I reckoned I couldn't stand it any more than a minute longer, but I set my teeth hard and got ready to try. Just then, Jim begun to breathe heavy. Next, he begun to snore. And then I was pretty soon comfortable again.
Hi, the book that I chose for Banned Books Week is Catcher in the Rye. From 1961 to 1982, it was the most banned books in quite a few schools. That is actually the reason why I heard about this book and become interested in it. The book was banned for language, scenes involving prostitution, premarital sex, and alcohol abuse. The story is about a 16-year-old boy named Holden, and it begins with him telling a story while he's in psychiatric care, and he's telling a story about how he was expelled from prep school the previous Christmas and the events afterwards. I have not gotten a chance to read the entire book yet, but I do look forward to it. I'm very curious as to everything in this book that would lead to it getting censored. Thanks.
Hello, my name is Matthew Chase. I'm an instructor of English. I'll be reading from Fitzgerald's The Great Gatsby, which was challenged in large part due to alcohol use and extramarital affairs. I've been drunk just twice in my life, and the second time was that afternoon. So everything that happened has a dim, hazy cast over it. Although until after 8 o'clock, the apartment was full of cheerful sun. Sitting on Tom's lap, Mrs. Wilson called up several people on the telephone. Then there were no cigarettes, and I went out to buy some at the drugstore on the corner. When I came back, they had disappeared, so I sat down discreetly in the living room and read a chapter of Simon Called Peter. Either it was terrible stuff or the whiskey distorted things, because it didn't make any sense to me. Just as Tom and Myrtle, after the first drink, Mrs. Wilson and I called each other by our first names, reappeared, company commenced to arrive at the apartment door. The sister, Catherine, was a slender, worldly girl of about 30, with a solid, sticky bob of red hair and a complexion powdered milky white. Her eyebrows had been plucked and then drawn on again at a more rakish angle, but the efforts of nature toward the restoration of the old alignment gave a blurred air to her face. When she moved about, there was an incessant clicking as innumerable pottery plate bracelets jingled up and down on her arms. She came in with such a proprietary haste and looked around so possessively at the furniture that I wondered if she lived here. But when I asked her, she laughed immoderately, repeated my question aloud, and told me she lived with a girlfriend at a hotel. Mr. McKee was a pale, feminine man from the flat below. He had just shaved, for there was a white spot of leather on his cheekbone, and he was most respectful in his greeting to everyone in the room. He informed me that he was in the artistic game, and I gathered later that he was a photographer and had made a dim enlargement of Mrs. Wilson's mother, which hovered like an ectoplasm on the wall. His wife was shrill, languid, handsome, and horrible. She told me with pride that her husband had photographed her 127 times since they had been married. Mrs. Wilson had changed her costume some time before, and was now attired in an elaborate afternoon dress of cream-colored chiffon, which gave out a continual rustle as she swept about the room. With the influence of the dress, her personality had also undergone a change. The intense vitality that had been so remarkable in the garage was converted into impressive hauteur. Her laughter, her gestures, her assertions became more violently affected moment by moment, and as she expanded, the room grew smaller around her until she seemed to be revolving on a noisy, creaking pivot through the smoky air.
What's going on, everybody? My banned book for the week is the Holy Bible. I'm going to read a few scriptures out of it real quick. All right, so in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. In him was life, and that life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, but the darkness has not understood it. There came a man who was sent from God. His name was John. He came as a witness to testify concerning that light, so that through him all men might believe. He himself was not the light. He came only as a witness to the light. The true light that gives light to every man was coming into the world. He was in the world, and though the world was made through him, the world did not recognize him. He came that which was his own, but his own did not receive him. Yet to all who received him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God. Children born not of natural descent, nor of human decision, or a husband's will, but born of God. The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only, who came from the Father, full of grace and truth.
Hey everyone, I am Kirsten Hines, Communication Instructor at UA-PTC. Today I want to talk to you about a banned book by the author Judy Blume, and it's called Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. It was banned, the book, Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, was banned because it covered topics like interfaith marriage, religion, puberty, sexuality, bras, boys, menstrual cycle, and anything else teenage related, but mostly because the main character, Margaret, talked to God every night and nobody knew it. So each chapter she would start out by talking to God. And so I'm going to read from chapter 1 where she talked to God. Are you there, God? It's me, Margaret. We're moving today. I'm so scared, God. I've never lived anywhere but here. Suppose I hate my new school. Suppose everybody there hates me. Please help me, God. Don't let New Jersey be too horrible. Thank you, God. So like I said, this book was banned because of the many topics Margaret talked about her character in the book. And she talked to God every chapter and throughout the book. So it's a great book, and I would encourage you to go read a banned book.
Hello, I'm Cynthia Farrenball, and I'm going to be reading George Orwell's 1984. With the deep unconscious sigh which not even the nearness of the telescreen could prevent him from uttering when the day's work started, Winston pulled the speakwrite toward him, blew the dust from its mouthpiece, and put on his spectacles. Then he unrolled the clipped-together 4 small cylinders of paper, which had already flopped out of the pneumatic tube, onto the right-hand side of his desk. In the walls of the cubicle, there were 3 orifices. To the right of the speakwrite, a small pneumatic tube for written messages, to the left, a larger one for newspapers, and on the side wall, within easy reach of Winston's arm, a large oblong slit protected by a wire grating. This last was for the disposal of waste paper. Similar slits existed in thousands or tens of thousands throughout the building, not only in every room, but at short intervals in every corridor. For some reason, they were nicknamed memory holes. When one knew that any document was due for destruction, or even when one saw a scrap of waste paper lying about, it was an automatic action to lift the flap of the nearest memory hole and drop it in, whereupon it would be whirled away on a current of warm air to the enormous furnaces which were hidden somewhere in the recesses of the building. Winston examined the 4 slips of paper he had unrolled. Each contained a message of only 1 or 2 lines in the abbreviated jargon, not actually newspeak, but consisting largely of newspeak words, which was used in the ministry for internal purposes. They ran, Times, 17, period, 3, period, 84, BB, speech, malreported Africa, rectify. Times, 19, period, 12, period, 83, forecast 3YP, 4th quarter, 83 misprints, verify current issue. Times, 14, period, 2, period, 84, many plenty, mal-quoted chocolate rectify. Times, 3, period, 12, period, 83, reporting BB day order, double plus sun good, refs, unpersons, rewrite, full wise, unsub, anti-filing. With a faint feeling of satisfaction, Winston laid the 4 messages aside. It was an intricate and responsible job, and had better be dealt with last. The other 3 were routine matters, though the second one would probably mean some tedious wading through lists of figures. Winston dialed back numbers on the telescreen and called for the appropriate issues of the Times, which slid out of the pneumatic tube after only minutes' delay. The messages he had received referred to articles of news items which, for one reason or another, it was thought necessary to alter, or as the official phrase had it, to rectify. For example, it appeared from the Times of the 17th of March that Big Brother, in his speech of the previous day, had predicted that the South Indian front would remain quiet, but that Eurasian offensive would shortly be launched in North Africa. As it happened, the Eurasian Higher Command had launched its offensive in South India and left North Africa alone. Left North Africa alone. It was therefore necessary to rewrite a paragraph of Big Brother's speech in such a way as to make him predict the thing that had actually happened. Or again, the Times of the 19th of December had published the official forecast of the output of various classes of consumption goods in the 4th quarter of 1983, which was also the 6th quarter of the 9th 3-year plan. Today's issue contained a statement of the actual output, from which it appeared that the forecasts were in every instance grossly wrong. Winston's job was to rectify the original figures by making them agree with the later ones. As for the 3rd message, it referred to a very simple error which could be set right in a couple of minutes. As short a time ago as February, the Ministry of Plenty had issued a promise, a categorical pledge, were the official words, that there would be no reduction of the chocolate ration during 1984. Actually, as Winston was aware, the chocolate ration was to be reduced from 30 grams to 20 at the end of the present week. All that was needed was to substitute for the original promise of warning that it would probably be necessary to reduce the nation at some time in April. As soon as Winston had dealt with each of the messages, he clipped the speak-written corrections to the appropriate copy of the Times and pushed them into the pneumatic tube. Then, with a movement which was as nearly as possible unconscious, he crumpled up the original message and any notes that he himself had made, and dropped them into the memory hole to be devoured by flames. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Heather Studham, and I'm an English instructor here at Pulaski Tech. And I'm very excited to be reading from Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury today for Banned Books Week. It was first written in 1953. It looks like from some preliminary research that it was first requested to be banned in 1987. And as recently as 2017, a mother wanted it banned from a school system's library system. What she said was, school is a place where children are supposed to be safe, but the material being read isn't safe content. With that in mind, I am pleased to read for you some from Chapter 1 of Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury. It was a pleasure to burn. It was a special pleasure to see things eaten, to see things blackened and changed. With the brass nozzle in his fists, with this great python spitting its venomous kerosene upon the world, the blood pounded in his head, and his hands were the hands of some amazing conductor playing all the symphonies of blazing and burning to bring down the tatters and charcoal ruins of history. With his symbolic helmet numbered 451 on his stolid head, and his eyes all orange flame with the thought of what came next, he flicked the igniter, and the house jumped up in a gorging fire that burned the evening sky red and yellow and black. He strode in a swarm of fireflies. He wanted, above all, like the old joke, to shove a marshmallow on a stick in the furnace, while the flapping, pigeon-winged books died on the porch and lawn of the house. While the books went up in sparkling whirls and blew away on a wind turned dark with burning. Montag grinned the fierce grin of all men singed and driven back by flame. He knew that when he returned to the firehouse, he might wink at himself, a minstrel man, burnt corpse in the mirror. Later, going to sleep, he would feel the fiery smile still gripped by his face muscles in the dark. It never went away, that smile. It never, ever went away, as long as he remembered. He hung up his black beetle-colored helmet and shined it. He hung his flame-proof jacket neatly. He showered luxuriously and then, whistling, hands in pockets, walked across the upper floor of the fire station and fell down the hole. At the last moment, when disaster seemed positive, he pulled his hands from his pockets and broke his fall by grasping the golden pole. He slid to a squeaking halt, the heels 1 inch from the concrete floor downstairs. He walked out of the fire station and along the midnight street toward the subway where the silent, air-propelled train slid soundlessly down its lubricated flue in the earth and let him out with a great puff of warm air to the cream-tiled escalator rising to the suburb. Whistling, he let the escalator waft him into the still night air. He walked toward the corner, thinking little at all about nothing in particular. Before he reached the corner, however, he slowed as if a wind had sprung up from nowhere, as if someone had called his name. The last few nights, he had had the most uncertain feelings about the sidewalk just around the corner here, moving in the starlight toward his house. He had felt that a moment before his making the turn, someone had been there. The air seemed charged with a special calm, as if someone had waited there, quietly, and only a moment before he came, simply turned to a shadow and let him through. Perhaps his nose detected a faint perfume. Perhaps the skin on the back of his hands, on his face, felt the temperature rise at this one spot where a person standing might raise the immediate atmosphere 10 degrees for an instant. There was no understanding it. Each time he made the turn, he saw only the white, unused, buckling sidewalk with, perhaps on one night, something vanishing swiftly across a lawn before he could focus his eyes or speak. But now, tonight, he slowed almost to a stop. His inner mind, reaching out to turn the corner for him, had heard the faintest whisper. Breathing? Or was the atmosphere compressed merely by someone standing very quietly there, waiting? He turned the corner. The autumn leaves blew over the moonlit pavement in such a way as to make the girl who was moving there seem fixed to a sliding walk, letting the motion of the winds and the leaves carry her forward. Her head was half bent to watch her shoes stir the circling leaves. Her face was slender and milk white, and in it was a kind of gentle hunger that touched over everything with tireless curiosity. It was a look, almost, of pale surprise. The dark eyes were so fixed to the world that no move escaped them. Her dress was white, and it whispered. He almost thought he heard the motion of her hands as she walked, and the infinitely small sound now, the white stir of her face turning, when she discovered she was a moment away from a man who stood in the middle of the pavement waiting. The trees overhead made a great sound of letting down their dry rain. The girl stopped and looked as if she might pull back in surprise, but instead stood regarding Montag with eyes so dark and shining and alive that he felt he had said something quite wonderful. But he knew his mouth had only moved to say hello. And then when she seemed hypnotized by the salamander on his arm and the phoenix disc on his chest, he spoke again. "Of course," he said, "you're a new neighbor, aren't you? And you must be," she raised her eyes from his professional symbols, "the fireman." Her voice trailed off. "How oddly you say that." I'd have known it with my eyes shut," she said slowly. "What, the smell of kerosene? My wife always complains," he laughed. "You never wash it off completely." "No, you don't," she said in awe. He felt she was walking in a circle about him, turning him end for end, shaking him quietly and emptying his pockets without once moving herself. "Kerosene," he said, because the silence had lengthened, "is nothing but perfume to me." "Does it seem like that, really?" "Of course, why not?" She gave herself time to think of it. "I don't know." She turned to face the sidewalk going toward their homes. "Do you mind if I walk back with you? I'm Clarice McClellan." "Clarice. Guy Montag. Come along. What are you doing out so late wandering around? How old are you?" They walked in the warm, cool, blowing night on the silvered pavement, and there was the faintest breath of fresh apricots and strawberries in the air. And he looked around and realized this was quite impossible so late in the year. There was only the girl walking with him now, her face bright as snow in the moonlight, and he knew she was working his questions around, seeking the best answers she could possibly give. "Well," she said, "I'm 17 and I'm crazy. My uncle says the two always go together. When people ask your age," she said, "always say 17 and insane. Isn't this a nice time of night to walk? I like to smell things and look at things and sometimes stay up all night walking and watch the sunrise. They walked on again in silence, and finally she said thoughtfully, "You know, I'm not afraid of you at all." He was surprised. "Well, why should you be?" "So many people are. Afraid of firemen, I mean. But you're just a man after all." He saw himself in her eyes, suspended in 2 shining drops of bright water, himself dark and tiny in fine detail, the lines about his mouth, everything there, as if her eyes were 2 miraculous bits of violet amber that might capture and hold him intact. Her face, turned to him now, was fragile milk crystal with a soft and constant light in it. It was not the hysterical light of electricity, but what? But the strangely comfortable and rare and gently flattering light of the candle. One time when he was a child in a power failure, his mother had found and lit a last candle, and there had been a brief hour of rediscovery, of such illumination that space lost its vast dimensions and drew comfortably around them, and they, mother and son, alone, transformed, hoping that the power might not come on again too soon. And then Clarice McClellan said, "Do you mind if I ask, how long have you worked at being a fireman?" "Since I was 20, 10 years ago." "Do you ever read any of the books you burn?" He laughed. "That's against the law." "Oh, of course." "It's fine work. Monday burn Millay, Wednesday Whitman, Friday Faulkner, burn 'em to ashes, then burn the ashes. That's our official slogan." They walked still further, and the girl said, "Is it true that long ago firemen put fires out instead of going to start them?" "No, houses have always been fireproof, take my word for it." "Strange. I heard once that a long time ago houses used to burn by accident, and they needed firemen to stop the flames." Montag laughed. I hope you'll read Fahrenheit 451. It's a good one.
If my favorite book was banned and I would be able to read it, I think I feel
pissed.
Like we were back in the Jim Crow days or the slavery days.
Like a sense of my childhood has been taken away from me.
I would be devastated not to be able to read. I would probably be sneaking away to read or something.
I might feel some type of way. I might be trying to keep something from me.
I would be at the clock tower with a little mic telling people that's not right.
If Harry Potter was banned, I would feel really hurt because I grew up reading his books.
Like the one book that I want to read and you're telling me I can't read it, that's like your favorite food.
I think that us having an ability to freely grab whatever book and explore whatever we want is actually a great opportunity.
We all have the right to do something, so when it comes down to reading, I mean, you have the right to do it. There's no right or wrong answer. If you want to read, you read.
We have to read because we were able to read at one point, and if we don't read, then we don't know.
No one's going to be able to tell me that I'm not able to read.
There are so many things that we couldn't read, back in the day. So it's important that I can read whatever I want.
My parents instilled in me that reading was very important because I feel like you can't really speak well without reading well. So they instilled in me at an early age to read.
I started looking into Malcolm X, and I heard him say a quote that if we don't read, we won't go as far until we open up a book. So the more I started to read, the more knowledge I started to obtain about our everyday lives and stuff.
Dr. Larry Little has really had an influence on why reading is important. He constantly tells us we know history because of his story, because we don't reach out and go look up for ourselves like what it is that our history is.
Having books are what shape and mold people in my generation. So I think that the importance of us having books it goes hand in hand with our education. So without the books, we can't get where we need to be.
Reading is the only thing that we have to get our own information. Like you can hear it from wherever you want to, but when you read it in black and white, you get that better understanding for yourself.
Books shouldn't be banned, period, because I feel like in America, we should be able to look at what we want to look at, we should be able to see what we want to see, and we should be able to read what we want to read.
Hi, I'm Dave Pilkey, the creator of Captain Underpants. You might have heard that Captain Underpants was the #1 most complained about book in America in 2012 and 2013. I have to admit, the news was quite a shock to me. I wondered, how could people be so offended by a series that contains no profanity, no sex, no nudity, no drugs, no smoking, no alcohol, no guns, and no more violence than a children's superhero cartoon? The best answer I could give you is this. Everybody doesn't always like the same things. A lot of people like Captain Underpants, and some people don't. Fortunately, as Americans, we live in a country where we don't all have to like the same things. The freedom to choose for ourselves what we read and think about is a hard-won right for every American. So what should you do if you find yourself offended by a book? How can you show your concern without undermining the freedoms of everyone around you? It's easy. All you have to do is make a simple change. The next time you find yourself thinking,
I don't want children to read this book,
just make a simple change. One tiny adjective can make all the difference. The next time you start to think,
that book does not belong in the library,
just make a simple change. And if you ever find yourself thinking,
I should complain about that book,
just make a simple change. You see, by changing ourselves, we can show our concern while still allowing everyone else to experience the freedoms they deserve. So make a simple change and make the world a better place.
Good morning, Hank. It's Tuesday. So the American Library Association's Office for Intellectual Freedom just released its list of the 10 most challenged books of the year in the United States. Challenged meaning someone requested to have the book removed from a school or library. And it turns out the most challenged book of 2015 was Looking for Alaska, which was written by me. The book has been challenged and banned around the country for offensive language and sexually explicit descriptions. I suppose this is a kind of honor. I mean, Looking for Alaska contained the very same offensive language and sexually explicit descriptions 10 years ago, but was much less likely to be banned because, not very many people had read it. Also, Looking for Alaska beat out some of my favorite books like Two Boys Kissing by David Levithan and Funhouse by Alison Bechdel, and also The Holy Bible, which came in 6th. To be fair, the Bible does contain its fair share of explicit passages. Anyway, I'm often asked to respond to the banning of Looking for Alaska from schools and libraries, so okay. Here is my response. Text is meaningless without context, and what usually happens with Looking for Alaska is that a parent shows one particular page of the novel to an administrator, and then the book gets banned without anyone who objects to it having read more than that one particular page. The scene in question involves a very awkward and ultimately failed attempt at oral sex, which is described in very cold and clinical language. In fact, the entire passage contains only one adjective: nervous. And then, in the book's next scene, two characters have a much more sensually described and passionate, but much less sexually explicit interaction. That passage ends, we didn't have sex, we never got naked, I never touched her bare breast, and her hands never got lower than my hips. It didn't matter. As she slept, I whispered, I love you, Alaska Young. So in context, the novel is arguing really in a rather pointed way that emotionally intimate kissing can be a whole lot more fulfilling than emotionally empty oral sex. Teenagers are critically engaged and thoughtful readers. They do not read Looking for Alaska and think, I should go have some aggressively unerotic oral sex. And they also don't read The Outsiders and think, I should join a gang, or read Divergent and think, I should jump onto moving trains. So far as I can tell, that kind of narrow prescriptive reading seems only to happen inside the offices of school superintendents. So yeah, I don't think Looking for Alaska is pornographic, and I don't think its readers find it titillating. But that noted, I don't think it should be up to me whether Looking for Alaska, or actually any book, is in a school or a library, because I am not a teacher or a librarian, the highly trained, criminally underpaid professionals we employ to make those decisions. As I've discussed in the past, I don't think publicly funded learning exists primarily for the benefit of parents, or even primarily for the benefit of students. It exists for the benefit of the social order. We are all better off with a well-informed, well-educated population, because that population is more likely to start successful businesses and develop treatments for cancer and write musicals about treasury secretaries. And that's why everyone pays taxes to fund public schools and libraries, regardless of whether you personally use the library or have kids in school. I think teachers and librarians know more about teaching and librarianship than I do. And I believe they must be allowed to do their jobs serving the whole public. But even beyond that, I don't believe that books, even bad books, corrupt us. Instead, I believe books challenge and interrogate. They give us windows into the lives of others and give us mirrors so that we can better see ourselves. And ultimately, if you have a worldview that can be undone by a novel, let me submit that the problem is not with the novel. Hank, I'll see you on Friday.
Welcome to our banned book collection. So thankful for this, it's such a blessing, yeah. I'll take a second just to show my affection. These books are the sunrise when they're throwing shade, trying to keep people far away. Make me wanna read each little word so slowly. They say things some just don't like, so they shut it down. Lots of reasons why they wanna take them out. Anyone can read them if they take the time to find. Look around and find them right here in the room now. Tú puedes leer los libros que elijas. Elegir es una libertad. Muchos libros han sido desafiados. Tú puedes leer los libros que elijas. Elegir es una libertad. Lee un libro que ha sido desafiado. Leer despacito. Lectura de libros prohibidos. Están dando un privilegio. Y estos son autores cuestionados. Leer despacito. La casa en Mango Street de Sandra Cisneros. Francisco Rosales, libro chicano. Loverboys escrito por Ana Castillo. Lee La casa de los espíritus y Paula. Isabela Lendatora. Solo mira un poquito. Pruebe este libro escrito por el autor Gabriel García Márquez. Grandes cosas esperando. Leer despacito. Why they wanna take them out. Anyone can read them if they take the time to find. Look around and find them right here in the room now. Tú puedes leer los libros que elijas. Elegir es una libertad. Muchos libros han sido desafiados.
Well, that brings us to the conclusion of our Banned Books Week 2020 readout. We want to thank everyone for viewing and hope each of you enjoyed this readout event. We also want to thank you, all the readers, for volunteering. This readout was brought to you by the University of Arkansas Pulaski Tech Library Committee in partnership with the UA-PTC students, faculty, and staff community. So keep reading banned books. Thank you.